Happy to see you. Yeah, I'm gonna go today. That's why I didn't go last night. I knew you.
Okay. Not bad. 10 minutes late. Done. Yeah, I think we're good.
You have a half an hour to do it from yesterday. All right, not bad.
Yeah. Only a blot and a half. No big deal. Okay. Today we have a bumping daf.
Me and Rebbe heard.
We're going to start from the Mishnah. We're going to start from the Mishnah.
To learn the Mishnah.
We are on, I don't know what we're on.
Yeah, the Mishnah. Right there. Okay, I got it.
Daf Zion. This is today's daf. What's the spot? Okay, Daf Zion. Korowes Megilla ba'adar harishon. So very quick. This is going to bring us back to Rosh Hashanah a little bit. We know that the way the calendar works is there's a solar calendar and a lunar calendar. The solar calendar is 365 days, and the lunar calendar is 12 Jewish months, which most years works out to be 354 days plus or minus 1 day. Yeah. So that basically means every year there's an 11-day gap that if we were to just allow Tesvav B'Nisan, right, the 15th of Nisan, which is Pesach, to happen every year on Tesvav B'Nisan, every year it would go 11 days earlier on the calendar, right? If one year it's April 1st, the following year it'll be March, I don't know, 19th or 20th, whatever it would be, and it would keep on going. Okay, who cares? Like that's what happens in the Muslim calendar. What they do is celebrate Ramadan, and Ramadan literally slides throughout the entire year because they keep a completely lunar calendar, whereas we keep what's referred to as a loony solar calendar. We're always trying to put the two together, and the reason is because
Loony is the right name.
the loony,
Loony is the right
loony, lunar solar calendar, combo job. So now the reason why we do that is because we have a halacha that we need Pesach to happen in the spring. The spring needs to be at the vernal equinox, the spring equinox, which means the time of the year when the sun is exactly, the earth and the sun are exactly of its movement between the solstices, meaning 12-hour day, 12-hour night. And that point is the start of the spring. So if we see that falls before that, what we do is we add in a month of Adar, which gives us a 13th month. And in that year, we end up extra 30 days. This is called Adar Sheni. We have an Adar Aleph, Adar Sheni, Adar Rishon, and an Adar Sheni. Now, if there were no holidays in Adar, we wouldn't have this Mishnah, but there are holidays in Adar, namely Purim. Purim happens on the 14th and the 15th in Adar. Now the question comes, what happens if it's a leap year where you have 2 months of Adar? The very important question comes up, well, which month of Adar should I celebrate the halachas of Purim in? Very basic question that needs to be answered. And if that's the case, even if, let's say, we know that it's going to be a leap year well in advance of Adar. Let's say I know in Tishrei, I do the math on the calculations of the calendar, and it comes out that it's going to come out this year month. So I have the question, which of those months when they come should I celebrate Purim? But what happens if get ahead of the game? They're in the middle of Adar, comes Purim, they think this is the only Adar, and in 2 weeks it's going to be Nisan, and then a week after Purim, they realize, oh no, Pesach's going to fall out a little too early, we have to add in a month of Adar. They can do that. They'll be doing it after they celebrated Purim. Now what happens in the second month of Adar? Say the fact that they celebrated Purim already in the first month is enough of a celebration that they don't have to repeat again in the second month of Adar, the second Adar, to do it all again? Or no, do we say that what they did in the first is enough? Our mission is going to touch, then we're going to see a brisa in the Gemara that's going to bring 3 opinions, and we're going to come out in the end of yesterday's daf, really, with a halacha, and then we'll move on to really more different inyanim. Agadita stuff. Okay, so what does it say in the Mishnah? Korowes HaMegillah the Adar Harishon. Let's say in this scenario that I give you, where you have after Purim an additional Adar. Yeah. So what happens? Korowes Megillah b'Adar Rishon. So you read the Megillah in the first Adar, V'nis Abra Hashana, and then they needed to make a second Adar, and now you have the fourth coming around again in Adar Sheni.
Wait, okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
So why would they add the second Adar? So
typically they wouldn't want to. They would always try to do it earlier. We actually learned this, I think, in Tainus. I think we learned it in Rosh Hashanah when we discussed the sugyas. Ideally, they would try to do it as early as Tishrei. That's the earliest they could do it. They would try to do it as possible, but some years they just, or it was too late in the year before they realized it, or it was close enough. Some it'll be super obvious that Tesvav is going to certainly be too early. But in some years, it might be enough that maybe they thought it would be okay. Basically, it comes down to they made a mistake. They let it go too far. But it's discussed in the Gemara. when to do it, and sometimes it does happen this way. Our Mishnah is discussing the unfortunate scenario where they forgot, they celebrated Purim, and then only afterwards they did it. So what does it say in this Abra Hashana? They made a second Adar. Korin Osa Adar Shenis. The Mishnah is telling us that you read the Megillah in the second month, meaning you need to repeat it. And it seems that that's the only thing you repeat. However, the Mishnah then says, Ein bein Adar Harishon Adar Hasheni, and this seems to be true whether it's in this unique scenario where they made the Uber year only after they celebrated it. Here it's saying it sounds like Chatzchila even. I mean, this is even if there's going to be two Adars when you're choosing which one to celebrate in, Ein bein Adar Harishon Adar Hasheni, Ala Kriyas Umatanas Levyonim, meaning it sounds like what we're saying here is Li'ikuva, meaning if let's say you went ahead all of the normal halachos of Purim in the first Adar, you'd be Yotzei, except for Megillah and Matanas Levyonim, which it seems you'd have to repeat. Yeah? So our Mishnah is just simply saying, if you lay in Megillah in the first Adar, you got to repeat it in the second. Why? Because the only difference between the first Adar and the second Adar is Megillah, and then it adds in Matanas Levyonim. And we'll see in the Gemara why both are mentioned, even though the original halach was only talking Megillah. That's the Mishnah. Okay. Now the Gemara is going to try to understand exactly who the Tan of our Mishnah is, and it's predicated on that we're going to make a deal, we're going to make an inference in the Mishnah. The Mishnah seems to say that the only difference between the first Adar and the second Adar is Megillah and Matanas Levyonim, which implies that there are those other mitzvahs of the Yontiv of Purim or the month of Adar that are different, that we would say you could do in the first month, and in the second month you don't have to repeat it. The Gemara says like this: Hala inyan seder parshiyos zevizeh shav. Seder parshiyos. So I don't know if you all know, but basically in the month of Adar, the month preceding Pesach, right, the month preceding Nisan, we have 4 separate Shabboses where we have an extra laning, right? So they basically go. You have a Parsha Shkolim, which is from Ki. So we do that in the Shabbos before the beginning of Adar. Then we do Parsha Zohar. That's where we talk about Zohar Asamolek, right? So that's what we'll do with the Shabbos before Purim. Then usually in most Adars the next week, we read Parshas Para, which is talking about Para Aduma. And then the last one is Parshas HaChodesh, which isn't always in Adar, but oftentimes it is. It's the Shabbos before Rosh Chodesh Nisan. The only time it's not is when Shabbos is Rosh Chodesh Nisan, then it's actually Nisan when you're reading it. But generally speaking, these 4 parshias are viewed as Shabboses that are linked to the month of Adar. So our Mishnah seems to say, we're going to compare Adar Rishon to Adar Sheni. The only distinction is Megillah and Matanas Levyonim. The implication is that these Daled parshias, which need to be read in the Adar, right, before Nisan, it's mashma here that those can be read in the first month and don't need to repeat it again in the second month. Meaning, the diak in the Mishnah is only Megillah and Matanas Levyonim, but not Daled parshias. Where it says, if that's the case, then I have to do a brisa where that brisa is, say, 3 opinions, and for various different reasons, not one of them can fit our Mishnah. So our Mishnah is saying Megillah and Matanas need to be repeated. Daled parshias do not need to be repeated. I'm going to show you a brisa with 3 opinions, and all 3 opinions don't fit with that. Let's go through it. Mani Mastis, and who is our Mishnah? Lo Tanakama, v'lo Reb Elazar, Reb Yossi, v'lo Reb Shimon Gamliel. The Tanya, there's a brisa. What does the brisa say? It's based on a pasuk. Karu es ha-Megillah, sorry, not a pasuk. Karu es ha-Megillah be'adar harishon v'nis abra hashana. Meaning this exact case of our Mishnah, where there's 2 adars. Karu also be'adar hasheni. The Tanakama holds you read the Megillah again. Should call mitzvahs Noah goes b'sheni, Noah goes b'rishon, because he holds you can really do everything that you would normally second Adar in the first Adar. Chutz mimikra Megillah. Only Megillah, and that's important. He doesn't mention Matanas Levyonim, as we'll see. He clearly can't be the Tana of our Mishnah because he doesn't mention Matanas Levyonim. It's mashma the Tana Kama will hold, and the Gemara is going to spell this out. I just want to point it out as we're going through it that he clearly can't be our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says you have to repeat Matanas Levyonim, and he only says you have to repeat Megillah. Okay. Reb Elazar Reb Yossi Omer, he says, Ein korin oso be'adar hasheni. You don't read the Megillah in the second month, and the Mashmos in Reb Elazar is lechatchila. I mean, he holds, everyone agrees.
Only the
You would assume everyone agrees the second month, or the month you're supposed to do it in. Reb Elazar holds no. In the scenario where you have 2 adars, I hold Adar is more important, and that's the one you should do it in. And therefore, Reb Elazar says, Ein korin oso be'adar sheni. If you did it in the first month, not only are you okay, he says rather ideally that's when you should do it. Right? Shekol mitzvah, shenoah goes b'sheni, those things that normally what he calls sheni. To him, sheni really is just the second occurrence, but that's not the ideal month. Shekol mitzvah, shenoah goes b'sheni, noah goes b'rishon, and really what he means to say is you need to do it in Rishon.
It might be in our mitzvah.
Oh, so we'll get to that. Yeah. I don't want to complicate things too early. B'shavin behesped b'tanis. Oh, sorry, I skipped the line. Reb Shimon Gamliel Omer Mishum Reb Yosef. Reb Shimon Gamliel says the third opinion, and he says a diametrically opposed opinion to the Tanakama. I'll explain in a moment. Af Korin Oso be'Adar Hashem. He says even Megillah is read in the second, meaning he holds what? Kol mitzvahs neshenoah goes b'sheni, ein noah goes. You can do nothing in the first. He holds you repeat everything, right? But as it pertains to Megillah, he agrees that you need to repeat it. So the Gemara now has a kasha, right? Sorry, v'shavin behesped b'tana shasur. However, all three of them agree that despite the fact that there's one month that's better than the other, they all agree that when it comes to hesped and tanis, that eulogizing and fasting is going to be usher on the 14th and 15th in other rishon and in other sheni. Now, ask the Gemara a question before we get to proving that our Mishnah can't be any of these Tanoim. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel hainu Tanakama, which is a very funny lashon, because really they're not. Meaning, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, what did he say? Everything goes in the second month, right? And the Tanakama said only Megillah goes in the second month. So what do you mean hainu Tanakama? The Sas Emes, as I mentioned to you yesterday, asked this question, and he's a little bit of a complicated answer. I didn't really understand it, but the question I think is better than the answer. But the question is very strong. Typically, when we say, Pliny, Hainu, Pliny, it typically means they're the same shita. Here, all we're saying is halachically, when it comes to Megillah, they agree, you repeat it. That's what his question is. And I don't have a good answer for the Sas Emes, but that's how we're going to understand this phrase of Hainu, Hainu. Meaning, the Tanakama holds you repeat the Megillah, and Rosh Hashanah holds you repeat the Megillah. All right? And Rebbe Lezer holds you don't repeat the Megillah. That's effectively what we have. Okay. So now, Amar Rav Papa. Now, Rav Papa is going to go through trying to understand the answer to this question. It seems that the first one and the second one are both basically saying the same halacha, at least in terms of Megillah. Amar Rav Papa, Seder Parshiyos Ikabi. Now he says, no. Read the words. So Shimon Gamliel is saying everything's repeated, and the Tanakama is saying only Megillah is repeated. So that means what comes out then is the Tanakama Sover Lechatchila B'Sheni. He holds that everything should ideally be done in the second month. However, in the scenario where you celebrated Purim early, because you didn't know there was going to be a second month, the Ovid Berishon Ovid. Everything would, except Barmi Mikra Megillah, for Megillah, which needs to be repeated, the Af Al Gav, the Kari Berishon, Kari B'Sheni, because that needs to be done in the other Samach L'Nisan. It needs to be done in the second other. That's the sheet of the Tanakama. The Tanakama holds, and I'm going to simplify it, the Tanakama holds you repeat Megillah only, nothing else. Daled Parshios, if you did it in the first month, no need to repeat. That's the Tanakama. Rebbe Eliezer, Rebbe Yossi, Savar, Afilu Mikra Megillah Lechatchila Berishon, and parenthetically, and Kol Shekei the Daled Parshas. Meaning he holds the entire thing needs to go in the first month. So far we have two very simple shitas. The first shita, the Tanakama holds everything should go in the second month, ideally. But if you did everything in the first month, you're fine. The only thing you need to repeat is Megillah. The second shita holds everything ideally should go in the first month, and I'm not going to complicate matters, so we'll just leave it at that. And then the third shita is Rav Shimon Gamliel. Rav Shimon Gamliel Savar, Afilu Seder Parshias. He goes the opposite. He says even the Dalet Parshias, he Kari B'Rishon, Kari B'Sheni, meaning what? It goes in the second month. If you had said everything in the first one, you repeat everything. So I'm just going to repeat just for the sake of simplicity because I did not make a chart. The Tanakama holds the only thing you repeat is Megillah. Rav Shimon Gamliel holds you repeat everything. You don't do anything. You can't rely on anything you did in the first month. And Rebbe Eliezer is a very strange sheet compared to the other two. He says, no. Not only do you not have to repeat, it's because everything you did in the first month was good enough because he holds the Chatchila, you do other Rishon. So now that we've established that, the Gemara is fearing ice. It's finishing off its question. So that's what I didn't want to complicate. So it's mashma from most of the Mefarshim. The Rebbe Eliezer is holding, but the Evid, you can't do it in the second month. But I don't want to complicate that. Yeah. So the point is we have three opinions. Opinion one, repeat Megillah. Opinion two, everything's done in the first month. And opinion three, everything needs to be repeated. So ask the Gemara, who's our Mishnah? Money mas nisan, right? Money. Tanakama kashem atanos. The problem with the Tanakama fits the most, right? He's the one who says all you do is repeat Megillah. Our Mishnah says you repeat Megillah, but our Mishnah, there's a thorny part of our Mishnah that also mentions Matanas Levyonim, and the Tanakama never mentioned Matanas Levyonim. So for that separate reason, he can't be the Tana of our Mishnah. Otherwise, it would say in our Mishnah only Megillah, not Matanas Levyonim. Or it would say in the Brisa also Matanas Levyonim. But the fact that it doesn't do that, he can't be the Mishnah. And Rebbe Eliezer, he's obviously not our Mishnah. Even Rebbe Eliezer, Rebbe Yossi, Kashanami Mikra Megillah, which is an understatement of the century. He can't be him because our Mishnah says you repeat something, right? According to Rebbe Eliezer, you shouldn't be doing anything in the second month. And Rav Shimon Gamliel, that can't be. Also, why? Kasha Seder Parshias, because he would hold you need to repeat Seder Parshias. And we made a diuk in our Mishnah. The only thing that you're repeating is Megillah and Matanas Levyonim, which is Mashma, the Dalet Parshios. You wouldn't repeat. You'd be Yotze in the first month. So therefore, I have a problem. It can't be Tanakama, can't be Rebbe Eliezer, and it can't be Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. Okay? So now, the Gemara is going to give two answers. The Gemara's first answer is going to be La'olam it's Tanakama. This Gemara is going to give a second answer, La'olam it's Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. And we're going to pass him that it's Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. But let's we'll work it out. La'olam Tanakama. And here we're just going to say it's very simple. V'tana mikra Megillah who hadin matanas levyonim. Even though the Mishnah had to explicitly say both, when the Tanakama said Megillah needs to be repeated, he obviously meant also matanas levyonim. Now, how could you make such a statement? Gemara says, what do you mean? Dahaba hatalia. Because one goes with the other, like we saw the other day on Daf Dalet. What did we say? We saw two opinions as to why you can't lay Megillah on Shabbos. The famous one of Rabba Gzeir, the Rabba of going outside for Amos. But then we saw an opinion of Rav Yosef that Tosfos explained, was explaining how even in the times of the Beis HaMikdash, you wouldn't be laying in Megillah. And why was that? Because Matanas Levyonim, they're always sitting there, Einei and Nesuos, Lemekar Megillah. They're always looking at the time. When do they collect? When they go around, everyone's in shul. And since that's when they're doing, so obviously Matanas Levyonim is connected to Megillah. So therefore, once I tell you that you have to repeat Megillah, it's clear as day that I also mean you need to repeat Matanas Levyonim. That is the first explanation of the Gemara. And La'olam, we have a Tana of our Mishnah. Okay. But Lamaisa, just so you know, that's not the halacha. We don't paskin this way. We paskin everything goes in the second month, and even b'di'evad, you'll see anything in the first month. Although there may be some things that maybe there's an echo of in the first month that maybe you can be yotze, but really be'etzem not. We hold not like this, and that's because of the iba yisema. We paskin like Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. Iba yisema la'olam Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. La'olam will put our Mishnah with Rav Shimon. Oh, that's the one distinction. Hesped you're not allowed to do in the first month also, right? Correct. Although that. There's a machlekes about that, but the way we're noheg is to not do hesped and tanis in the first month. The Olam will say that our Mishnah is Rav Shimon Gamliel, and again, just to clarify, that means Rav Shimon Gamliel says you repeat everything, even Dalet Parshias. Our Mishnah said very clearly you only repeat Mikra Megillah and Matanas Levyonim. So how can you put that two and two together? We're going to edit the Mishnah. Now, the edit here is not one of those crazy chisuri mechsaras where we put in an entirely new phrase and it's just a slight adjustment. What did our Mishnah say? Ein bein adar la adar, meaning it was trying to prove that the first adar and the second adar are the same except for Megillah and Matanas Levyonim. The change here is going to be we're not comparing the month to the month, we're comparing the day to the day. So therefore, the Purim in the first month and Purim in the second month, the mitzvahs of the day, right? Therefore, since we're not talking about the month, we're not at all discussing the possibility of the Dalet Parshias, which are related to the month and not related to the day. That's how the Gemara is going to answer it. And La'olam our Mishnah will be Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. V'hachitani ein bein arba'a asar sheba adar harishon le'yudalet sheba adar hasheni elamikra Megillah umatanos. Right, and therefore you can't make a diuk about Dalet Parshias because it wouldn't be relevant to say that about. If I tell you the difference between the first Purim and the second Purim is that you don't say Dalet Parshias, you'd say, what? You never say Dalet Parshias on Purim, meaning it has nothing to do with the day of Purim. That has to do with the month of Adar. So by changing the lashon of the Mishnah to be Yudalet Adar instead of the month of Adar, then it would make sense. However, there still would be a perfectly normal diuk of Hal Inyan Hesped V'Tanas Zevaz Shavim because that's unique to the day. Although from here it's mashma that, and the first one will say that originally in the Havamina we thought that if there'd be an Isser Hesped of Tanis in the first month and the second month, it would be on both the 14th and the 15th, no matter where you live. Whereas from here, this change, now it's mashma, would only be on the 14th in other Rishon, which is how we pass him. The Ilu Seder Parshias Leimari, but there's not at all a discussion as it relates to the Dalet Parshias, in which case then you don't have a diak. But La'olam the halacha would be like Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, which means that you must repeat everything. And in fact, Amar Rabbi Chia bar Avin, Amar Rabbi Yochanan Hilchos Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, Shamar Mishum Rabbi Yossi, which is how it comes out lahalacha. I'm just going to say very briefly, what's the one mitzvah that's just not even discussed in the Gemara? Suda, Mishlach Manas. What do you mean? Ein bein zeh lezeh, Matanos Levyonim and Mikra Megillah. What happened to Mishlach Manas? Okay, so Enochanami. I mean, I'm with you on that. So Tosfos actually touches on it. Tosfos says, "V'yeshin noagin lasas yimei mishnu v'simcha ba'arba asar." He says there are those that are knowing to do it on the 14th. Ubichamisha social adar harishon. However, Tosfos says v'lo nehira. Now, Tosfos is just saying lo nehira that you have a chiyuv, right? V'lo nehira meaning lo nehira meaning that you're yotze your mitzvah. Then doesn't mean that there isn't a din lechatchila to do it. Right? V'lo nehira. So he basically brings a raya. What's his raya? He says, why does the Mishnah have to tell me, or why does the Brisa have to tell me that there's an Isser Hesped V'Tanis on the first Adar's Purim? if there's a chi of simcha and mishta and all that other stuff, wouldn't that inherently mean that there's no? It's also do hesped and tainus on a Purim. Tarot says you need to tell me there's an Isser hesped and tainus because without it I wouldn't know. How would I not know? What do you mean it's a Yom Simcha? Tarot says it's not a Yom Simcha. So Tosfos brings a raya like that. Lamaisa in Shulchan Aruch, it's not mentioned really whether we have a chi. There's certain minhagim.
Look at the words of paper. Can I love change talk about Hashmi?
Yeah. You don't have to, but about that you could. Yeah, it's like a little bit like Purim Mishulish. It's like, so what do you have? You have, if it falls out on Shabbos in Yerushalayim, you're going to end up having Thursday night, if you're behind the din of the Ramah to have a shtickle Suda, then the next day, Friday, you're going to be doing a Mikra Megilla. You're going to be doing other things as well. Shabbos, you're going to have to be machmir for the Pri Chadash, a Suda on Shabbos, another Suda on Sunday. You can go 3.5 days. Just, okay.
I'm attached at least.
Okay. Rabbi Yochanan. No. So now, even though we have 3 shitas of these in this brayso, we really effectively have 2 shitas. We have one shita that holds you lechatchila should do everything in the second month, and one shita that holds you should lechatchila do everything in the first month. The Tanakam and Rosh Shimon Gamliel were just arguing over what b'di evid can you do in the first month. With lechatchila, they both agree you do it in the second month, and Rabbi Eliezer holds you do it in the first month. So we're going to assume, as we discuss, continuing the Gemara here, there's 2 opinions. There's the opinion of lechatchila do it in the second month, lechatchila do it in the first month.
What about the fast?
So the fast would for sure be in the second month. That's for sure. You're saying if you did it, you would repeat.
First month,
I don't know. I would assume if you fasted in the first month. Yeah, I don't know. It's a very good question.
Now they added the second month, right? They said we need a second month.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know. Because on the one hand, on the one hand, I would say the pshat in our Mishnah is that it's only. No.
The question.
Rabbi
The limit is to find out the answer.
Rabbi Akiva Eiger is not known for his answers. He's known for his questions. Right? Those are the famous Rabbi Akiva Eiger, Sarchin, Gadol, Either way, so I don't know. It's a good question because if you think about it, on the one hand, we're not really discussing anything in the Mishnah other than mitzvahs. We're talking about simcha, we're talking about tainus. Well, no, we're talking about Megilla, we're talking about matanos levyonim, maybe suda, dalet parshas. These are all positive things to do, meaning kum ve'aseh. But it could be the mitzvah of tainus is also mitzvah. Normally, a tainus is like a tsar. It's a don't eat. But it could be we always talk about tainus Esther as being very special. Tainus Esther is special in that it's the only tainus we bring early versus all the other tainus in which we push. If it's falls on Shabbos, all the other tainuses go after Shabbos. Tainus we pull early, and that's because we don't see the tainus of tainus Esther as like a tainus of tsar. It's a tainus of simcha. It's almost like we're fasting besimcha. It's like a very unique type of thing. We're not right. It doesn't have the same feel as a nasar b'tevis or shavasar b'tamas of sadness. It's almost like we're about to have Purim. It's like a little bit of a simcha to tainus. It could very well be that if you did it in the first month, maybe you would be Yotzei. I would assume tainus Esther goes together with Yimei Simcha. So whatever the din's going to be by Simcha, you would have by the tainus.
Wow.
I mean, at least according to.
Another question.
Yeah, the question's good. The question's better than the answer, that's for sure. Yeah. Okay. Either way, continues the Gemara. I'm Rabbi Yochanan. Ushneim mikra echad darshu. They both come from a pasuk, meaning where they chose which month to go with. Where they chose which month to go with comes from the same pasuk. So what does the pasuk say? B'chol shana v'shana. The pasuk says in the Megillah that every year in, year out, they try to pattern everything the same. We saw this already a little earlier in a different item. Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yossi Savar, he who says that you go with the first month, other Rishon Savar, B'chol shana v'shana. What does it mean? Makol shana v'shana. Other hasamach l'shvat. Other is always the one after Shvat. Therefore, every year, even when you have a double other, we'll go with the first one because that's the one that's close to Shvat. So to Avkan, other hasamach l'shvat. So he goes with other Rishon. Nisan, it's always the one that's right before Nisan. Since it's the one that's right before Nisan, so too this year, when you have 2 choices of the other Rishon, other Sheni, you go with the second other because it's the one right before Nisan. Avkan, other Hasamach Nisan. Right? So they both give answers, and they're both effectively saying the same thing. And the question is, one chooses to go with the first month, and one goes to choose with the second month. Now, I'll point out the Svara. Give me a second. Bishlam Rebbe Lezer, Rebbe Yossi, Mistaber time. It makes sense. Rebbe Lezer. He holds it goes with the first one. Why? The ein ma'avir and al ha-mitzvahs. You don't pass over mitzvahs, which is a little bit schwer here because normally ein ma'avir and al ha-mitzvahs is typically where you have like 2 things in front of you, 2 mitzvahs to do. Which one should you do first? That's what Friday night. You're not supposed to like put one column in front of the other. It lets you grab your talis. Your tefillin before your talis in the morning. You're not supposed to then put your tefillin down and put your talis on. Once you have your tefillin in your hands, it's like a bizayin to the mitzvah. You're supposed to put your tefillin on first, then your talis. Ideally, yeah, because it's like a. That's why you do that lechatchila. Lechatchila, you should do that. But let's say you ended up grabbing your tefillin first.
I do it all the time.
Don't do it.
No, but I'm saying, I know, but I remember learning this, but you're supposed to cover you put it down and you cover it, and then you put your towels on.
I don't know if you have to. Oh, you're saying if you grabbed it first. Oh, I never heard that. Okay, I hear that. That's
What?
if you take your you're supposed to put your towels on first, right? But if you grab your filling, okay, you're supposed to cover it. I cover it with the towel. Cover the filling. You can't have your filling out and be putting your towels on.
Oh, you mean there's no aim of here, and if you cover it?
I never heard that, but
I mean, it
sort of makes
not
sense.
Ideal. It's not ideal. I remember learning this.
It's like it could be. It's like
I do it all the time by mistake, of course, because you don't have.
Who doesn't? Listen, some people I have my fill-in sitting in my bag. I have to,
right.
And I'm not so flexible, so it's hard for me to make that move. But either way, so he says, "Ein ma'avirin al mitzvahs, choose the first month." So I'm just pointing out it's a little bit. Tosfos basically uses our Gemara over here as a,
maybe it's not aim of here if you just touch the bag, not the.
Could be. That's a good point. Yeah. Either way, so those over here points out Ein Mavirin. Actually, there's two dinim, Svei dinim and Ein Mavirin. The Ein Mavirin of choosing one over the other, and then here we're only using it for drushes. We're saying which other should we do? Well, Ein Mavirin. Well, it's not. If I hold it's the second other, then there's no Ein Mavirin. Then the first one there's nothing, right? So it's a little bit of a difficult point, but okay, fine. Continue the Gemara. Allah shring leel my time. What's shring leel's reason? Meaning l'chayri you should say Ein Mavirin. Amar Rebbe Tevi time of the Reb Shimon Megamil mismach gula l'gula adav because he says you want to have the other Sheni go into Nisan. Nisan's a month of miracles. Others a month of miracles. We want to have the miracles go with the miracles. In fact, they bring a Rashi that we just saw in Masechta Tainus. Interestingly, the memra of Shas of Mishenichnas Adar Marbe Mesimcha is not in Megilla. Where is it? It's in Tainus. Because over there we mentioned in the Mishnah Mishenichnas of Mematin Besimcha. Once we're Mat Besimcha, well, 1 second, we should also be Marbe Besimcha in Adar. And Rashi over there says a very interesting thing. Rashi says, why? Why should we be Marbe Besimcha in Adar? Because that's the month when you have the miracles of Purim and Pesach. No, Mishenichnas Adar Marbe Besimcha. Rashi says because it's got Purim and Pesach, because it's a Zman of miracles. Because other, meaning they want to bring a riot from that Rashi. That Rashi holds that even though our Gemara is discussing here which month goes in with month, which mitzvahs go in which month, that Rashi would be mashma that Mishenichnas others only said on other Sheni, not on other Rishon. They bring riots against that, but okay, fine. So that's Reb Shimon Gamliel's reason. So they both, not Rebbe Eliezer, Amar Taima, Reb Shimon Gamliel mehacha. A different opinion as to why Reb Shimon Gamliel chose the second Adar. The Chsiv l'kayim asigaris hapurim mazos hashenis, a second time, meaning, and therefore they understand the hashenis to mean other base. And the Gemara now is going to explain that I need both psukim of B'chol Shana V'Shana and Shenis. Why? V'yitzrich l'michta v'Shenis. And let's start the Daf Yomi today. V'yitzrich l'michta B'chol Shana V'Shana.
We already had 20 minutes to finish off the Daf
What do you think?
Can we start tonight? Maybe it's started.
Maybe. We'll talk. Let's listen. Yeah, we'll get to the mission. Don't worry about it. It sort of moves.
We actually just started.
By the way, we started 10 minutes late. So V'yitzrich l'michta B'chol Shana V'Shana. The B'chol Shana, I need both psukim. Why? Because all I would have had is B'chol Shana V'Shana. I might think that means Havi Amina Kikush, and I would have the problem we brought up earlier. If you have to choose between 2 months, why not just go like Rebbe Eliezer and say the first month because of Ein Mavir Nala Mitzvahs? So Kamash Milan, I have Hashenis to tell me that no, you go with the second month, and therefore you only do it in the second month. The Yashmin and Hashenis, and if all of it has the pasuk by Hashenis, I might think Shenis means twice, not the second, twice. I would think, meaning what? Havi Amina b'tchila b'rishon b'sheni, meaning you should do it in both. That when you have 2 others, I might have a Havamina to be really from and do everything twice. Kamash Malan, that both psukim between the 2 of them tell me I only do it once, and I choose the second month to do it. And by the way, that's the halacha, the Chol Shana V'Shana, to tell me that. Fine. Rebbe Eliezer, Rebbe Yossi, hi, Hashem is my avid. So if you're telling me that Rebbe Shimon needs both psukim to tell me why I do it in the second month, and the first month, Rebbe Eliezer says I learn it from the Chol Shana V'Shana, he doesn't need Hashenis for anything. What does he do with the pasuk of Hashenis? Because since they did it in stages, they first made Purim in Shushan, and then only afterwards they extend it to the rest to make it a national holiday. Since they did it in stages, Hashenis doesn't mean the second month; it just means the second part of their takana, which, by the way, seems to not go with the Ramban that we mentioned earlier, that they first started in Yudalid, and then only afterwards they did it in Shushan. But in kan makom laharich. Amr of Shmuel Bar Yehuda, once we mention him, let's mention something else he said. Very famous Gemara. Amr of Shmuel Bar Yehuda, maybe the second most famous Gemara. On Beis is the most famous Gemara in this Masechta. Amr of Shmuel Bar Yehuda, Sholchel hem Esther lechachamim. Esther sent a letter to the Chachamim, meaning after the miracle, she sent a letter to the Chachamim of that time. Kivu'uni l'dairos. I want my story to be read every year on a Yontif. I want create a Yontif and read the story of what we'll call Esther. At the time, it wasn't called a Megilla yet. It was just, I want my story to be told. This story needs to be told for generations. They said back to her, Shalchula, Kina you're going to cause the goyim to want to hate us. Why? Not that they need a reason. Because they're going to see us besimcha over their downfall. What are we doing? We're celebrating, having a Yemei Simcha, and reading and screaming about how Hashem saved us from these terrible, evil Haman in Russia, whatever. They're going to kill us. They're going to come back to defeat the whole purpose. Yatzachar b'Hafseda over here. Sholcha lahem, she sent back to him. What are you talking about? What do you read? Read the Megillah that we have. Meaning she didn't actually have it written yet. But kivar kisuva ani al divrei hayomim lamalchei modei aparas. I'm all over CNN. It's already in the news. Everyone, well, no one listens to CNN. It's on Fox. Yeah, everyone's listening. Everyone knows already what happened with Esther. Everyone knows the story. The Goyim aren't going to be any more angry than they already are. It's not our job to worry about whether they're going to think of us or not. We have responsibility for Pirsumei Nisa, and therefore, and it looks like the Chachamim were masking. And in the Kachava, we made a yontiv. Now, yontiv, what do we do on that yontiv? She said, we read. Do we have an actual Megillah that is called part of Chav Dalet Sifrei Tanakh? Because at the point there was not Chav Dalet, there was Chav Gimel Sifrei Tanakh, right? She was the 24th Sefer in Tanakh. She's one of Ksuvim, the 5 Megillahs, yeah? So in a moment. So she was asking for it to be a yontiv. It seemed the Chachamim were asking. Rav Chanina, Rav Yochanan, Rav Chaviva, Masnu B'Kulei Seder Moed. These guys were very, very well versed in all of the sugyas in Seder Moed, Shabbos, Eruvin, Psachim, Sukkah, and Megillah, and Chulu. And Kol Ki Haizuga, just parenthetically, whenever you have these guys sitting around, then you mention Rabbi Yochanan, just know, Chilufi Rabbi Yochanan, Ma'al Rabbi Yonasan, this is the Gemara doing its own editing, that the group actually is not made of Rabbi Yochanan, it's made of Rabbi Yonasan. But regardless, what did they say? They said the following thing was what happened, meaning as it pertains to whether the Megillah itself should be considered one of Chav Dalet Sifrei Tanakh. You see the adjustment in the language here is write me l'toros, meaning I want it to be one of the ksuvim. Yeah, Sholchula, they sent back to her. The pasuk says, "Halo kasavti l'shlishim." This is a pasuk which is referring to the 3 times where one can talk about Amalek. One of them is in B'Shalach, I think. The other one is in, I think, Kisetzi, but please correct me if I'm wrong. And the third one is in Shmuel Aleph or Shmuel Beis, I forget, which is the story of Shaul and Agag, which is the 3 times in Tanakh where we have the stories of Amalek, and the diuk is Shlishim 3 times, V'lo Revi'im not 4 times. Meaning, I'm sorry, we can't make a 4th sefer that's going to be an official part of Tanakh that's discussing Mechias Amalek. So therefore, sorry, we can't make Sefer Esther, Megillah Esther, can't be. Ad shematzu lo mikra kasab b'Torah. She said, no, I got another pasuk where they found the pasuk. What's the pasuk they found to make the drasha? Ksav Zois Zichrein B'Sefer. We're going to darshan each one of these words. Ksav Zois, Zichrein B'Sefer. This is actually in the psukim in Shmais that are talking about the story of Amalek. And we darshan like this. Ksav Zois, Masha Kosov Kanu B'Mishnah Torah. Meaning what's written in Shmais and in Mishnah Torah should be taken from the words Ksav Zois. That'll be the first of the 3. So he's basically in this drasha combining the 2 times in Torah, in Shmos and in Mishnah Torah. That'll be the first time we talk about Mechias Amalek. Zichrain, Mashakasu b'Neviim, that'll be what's happening in Shmuel. Therefore, I have this 3rd availability, B'Sefer, to teach me Mashakasu b'Megillah, which would then mean that I have a drasha to support the idea that Esther should be considered one of the Chav Daled Sifrei Tanakh. That's the way he darshans it. Ketanoi, the way he darshans it is totally in a machlekes Tanai, meaning whether we hold there's a drasha to say that Esther is considered part of Tanakh or not is a machlokes Tanai. What's the machlekes? How do they darshan? Ksoiv Zois, Masha Kosav Kan. Zichrain, Masha Kosav b'Mishnah Torah. V'Sefer, Masha Kosav b'Nevi'im. Meaning, the difference between the 2 ways to darshan the psukim is that do we say that Ksoiv Zois includes everything in the Torah, or only one of the parshas in the Torah, and then the next pasuk is the second parsha? So if I say that the first pasuk is telling me both, I'm having open available word for Esther. If you're telling me that it's only one of them, then I need to use the second one for the second parsha in the Torah, and therefore I have no opening for Esther. And again, the understanding basically is the 2 different shitas are, what does it mean Shlishim 3? Does it mean that I need 1 in each of Torah, Nevi'im, and Ksuvim, in which case then Esther is included, or no, Shlish means 3 times just in general throughout all of Tanakh, in which case then it means I already have 3 and Esther can't be. But the point is, it's a machlekes Tanaim. The first way to darshan is Divrei Yeshua, but Rebbe Lazar, Hamoidai, Omer, he darshans the way we saw earlier, Ksayzois, Mashakotzav, Kanu, Mishnah Torah, Zichron, Mashakotzav, B'Nevi'im, Sefer, Mashakotzav, Megillah. The point is, from this Gemara, you see clearly that there's a shaila whether Esther should be considered part of Tanakh. Just, Agav, I saw, who was it over here? B'Sefer. I forgot to write down who said it. That B'Sefer is Gematria 342. which is the same gematria as Haman, which would be from Megillah Esther, Agag, which would be from Nevi'im, and Amalek. If you add them all together, it's 342. The same gematria as B'Sefer, the shtickle raya that we go more with the tzad to say that Megillah Esther is considered Sefer Tanakh. Okay. Amr Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Esther eina mitam es yadayim. There's a halacha in Shabbos. There were like 18 takanas that they made. One of the things they said, two reasons why. One reason was because people were eating their truma near Sifrei Kodesh, and what was happening is they were leaving crumbs. Animals were coming, mice were coming and eating it, and what they were ended up doing was ended up being a bizayon to the actual cloth that the ksuvim were written on. They would eat them, they would eat into the things, and it was creating a problem. The svarim were getting ruined, so therefore they made a takana to make the cloth that the svarim were written on tamei. Mitames yadayim, meaning that it'll make it truma tameh. Therefore, it would stop people from eating near the svarim because they wouldn't want to get their truma tameh. This is how Chazal thought. Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense. People, they're just, and this is why, by the way, when you see people doing Hag ben Galila, someone will use his talus to grab the Sefer Torah to lift it up, because really we're not supposed to touch the cloth with our hands, because there's a tumah derabanan of touching the cloth. Now we're only
tastes when I eat near like the Gemara or something.
Yeah.
My grandfather was a from guy. He never ate. He never.
Probably more because
of Pesach. Yeah. Because he crumbs. You never know.
Okay, continues the Gemara. So what does he say? Esther ain't a matames yadayim. So to say that Esther is not matames yadayim is the equivalent of saying that Esther is not from Chav Dalet Sefer Tanakh. But it's a pretext, right? Meaning this is a proxy. Sorry, it's a proxy for saying whether it is or not part of Chav Dalet Tanakh. If it's part of Chav Dalet Tanakh, then it should have the same halacha as every other thing that's written on cloth. But by saying it's not matames yadayim, it's saying it isn't included in that din derabanan, which means they must have understood that Esther is not part of Tanakh, right? So remember the Savar Shmuel Esther la Baruch HaKodesh Nemra. It sounds to me like you're saying that Esther, the story of Esther, Megillah Esther, was not said or written Baruch HaKodesh, because if it was written Baruch HaKodesh, it would be considered one of the Chav Daled Sifrei Tanakh. I've Hamar Shmuel Esther Baruch HaKodesh Nemra. We know that what was said by Esther was done Baruch HaKodesh, and Shmuel is the one who said it. So which one is it? Did Shmuel say it was Baruch HaKodesh? In which case it is part of Sefer Tanakh, or did he say no, and it's not part of Sefer Tanakh? He says no. Nemra likrais. The story was done Baruch HaKodesh. What happened was Baruch HaKodesh. But was it necessarily Baruch HaKodesh that it needed to be written as a part of Tanakh? Lav Dafka. That's Shmuel's opinion. And asked the Gemara, how can he say that? Reb Meir Omer Koheles Eino Matames Yadayim U Machlekes B'Shir Hashirim. Reb Meir holds that whether Koheles is Matames Yadayim is for sure it's Matames Yadayim. B'Shir Hashirim is a Machlekes. Reb Yossi Omer Shir Hashirim Matames Yadayim. Again, this is all a discussion about whether these Sfarim are considered part of Chav Dalet Sifrei Tanakh. So you see that it's not just Esther. There are Tanaim who hold that Koheles and perhaps Shir Hashirim are not included. Reb Shimon Omer Koheles Mikule Beisham Michumre Beis Hillel Haval, and this is the key line here. Rus v'Shir Hashirim v'Esther Matames Yadayim. He finally brings Esther in here. No one argues about Esther. Esther is certainly, according to each one of these three Tanaim, Matames Yadayim, which means at least these three Tanaim hold that Esther is part of Chav Dalet Sifrei Tanakh. So ask the Gemara Shmuel, how can you and Amayra argue on these three Sifrei Tanakh, these three Tanoim about whether it's part of Chav Dalet Sifrei Tanakh, right? So what's he going to say? He's going to say, what do you mean? I have a Tana. What's his Tana? The very first Tana we brought, Rabbi Yeshua. Who the Amr Rabbi Yeshua? Remember, we saw there was two ways to darshan the pasuk. Rabbi Yeshua darshan it in such a way where Esther was left out in the cold, can't be included in the Chav Dalet Sifrei Tanakh, whereas Rabbi Eliezer over there said, I darshan in a way that it could include it. It must be these three Tanaim agree with Rabbi Eliezer. And Shmuel saying, I hold like Rabbi Yeshua. No big deal. He's an Amayra. Again, Shmuel's not like Rav. Rav is a Tanu Polig. Shmuel's not a Tana that can argue on Tanaim, but Shmuel says I can rely on it. Lamaisa. Okay, we'll go back to Tanya Reb Shimon ben Asi Omer Koheles Eino Matames Yadayim Mipnei Shechachmos Shloimei. The reason why Koheles is not Matames Yadayim is because really it's not Baruch HaKodesh. It was just a collection of the wise things that Shlomo HaMelech said. Omer lo, they said to him, V'chizu b'vad Omer, you're telling me that he just put down all his wise things, and that's what his book is? Are there not other things he said that were wise, and therefore it must be these were specifically chosen by Ruach HaKodesh? V'haloi kfar nemer, the pasuk says, V'yadar b'shloisha salaf mashal. He said over 3,000 mashalim. Not only that, V'omer, the pasuk says, Al toisav al dvarav, that you shall. He said about his own thing, his own svarim. Don't add upon anything I've written. So clearly, it was done by Ruach HaKodesh, because if it wasn't done by Ruach HaKodesh, then it would just be a collection of his sayings. He wouldn't have said these things. Gemara says, why do you need to bring two psukim? Ma'va oimer. So Gemara answers, V'chitema meimar tuva omar di iboy ichte v'di iboy lo ichte. Maybe he'll say he just wrote a lot of things, and some stuff he wrote down, some stuff he didn't write down. I have another pasuk, the second pasuk, Tashma, I'll tell you about Dvarav to say what? To teach you that obviously if Shlomo HaMelech himself said, don't repeat meaning don't add on to anything I've written. What that means is, although I've said a lot of smart things, what's written in this book, that's the stuff that was Baruch HaKodesh, and that's the stuff that needs to be in the Sefer, and therefore that's the stuff that needs to be treated like Chaf Dalet Sefer Tanakh. Tanya Rebbe Eliezer Omer, Esther Baruch HaKodesh Nemra, and they're going to go to bring a couple of psukim here to prove that the story of Esther was Baruch HaKodesh. What are those things? Rebbe Eliezer says it comes from the Shenemar, the pasuk is Vayomer Haman Beliboy. How did Esther know that what he thought in his heart? Obviously, Baruch HaKodesh. Rabbi Akiva Omer Esther Baruch HaKodesh Nemar Shenemar V'tihi Esther Noises Chaim Be'enei Kol Ra'ah. How did he know? How did they know that Esther was loved by everyone? That's just in their heart. How did they know that? Must be Baruch HaKodesh. Rabbi Omer Esther Baruch HaKodesh Nemar Shenemar V'yivoda Hadav LeMordechai. That Mordechai knew of this thing that Big Son of Sarah were doing. How did Mordechai know it? Must be he had Baruch HaKodesh. Now that's the kasha they ask. Evan over here is okay. Mazel Tov. Mordechai had Baruch HaKodesh. How do you know that Esther had Baruch HaKodesh? So he leaves it as a kasha. Rabbi Yosef ben Damascus Omer Esther Baruch HaKodesh Nemar Shenemar Ubebiza Lo Yisholchu Es Yadam. How do you know what happened a million miles away? Must be Baruch HaKodesh Nemar. They didn't have email back in those days.
Esther wrote down the words.
Yes, Esther and Mordechai did it together. But yes, Esther wrote down the words. Yeah. But the question is, what's done Baruch HaKodesh or not? So if you're writing these words, and that's one of the answers they give is that Mordechai, if he's part of the writing, it could be if he has Baruch HaKodesh. That's yeah. Amar Shmuel, Ihavi Hassam. If I was there, Shmuel says, and again, you see Shmuel clearly, at least in the sugya of Purim as it pertains to Esther, he seems to be mefak fake on the Tanoim over here. These Tanoim say, "Oh, it's a Baruch HaKodesh." He says, if I was there, Yehavya Hassam, amongst the conversation of the Tanoim, I would have not used any of their psukim. Havya Amina, Milsa the Adifa Mikul, I would have said a better svara to prove that Esther was Baruch HaKodesh. Shenamar Kimu v'Kiblu, Kimu Lamala, Mashikiblu Lamat, which is a drasha, really. I mean, it's really not Mefurish in the pasuk. The pasuk shot in the pasuk is Kimu v'Kiblu is talking about just the Jews. They were Mekayim it, they established it, the Kiblu, and they accepted it upon themselves. But he understands that the way it's written has maybe a potential for drasha. Therefore, Kimu v'Kiblu means Kimu down here, and they makabel it up there, which means what we did. How do we know what happened up in Shemayim? Torah says it must be Baruch HaKodesh Nemra, and therefore that was what Shmuel says. I'm a Rav. Rav says this statement of Shmuel is very stark. I could have knocked up on all of the other Tanaim's psukim, but on Shmuel's I couldn't have. Why? I'm a Rav. Lakulu islu pircha lebar mi Shmuel. Why? The less like pircha, I have no kash on Shmuel's pasuk, which to me, honestly, in reading it, just shows you how much we don't know, or at least I don't know. I think Shmuel's the weakest of the four, but okay, fine. The Rebbe Eliezer svarahu. Rebbe Eliezer, what did he say? Haman knew beliboy. How did Esther know that? Elamai must be Ruach HaKodesh. She says, no. What do you mean, Svaru? Who else? What would Haman have thought? What was the story? Achashverosh asked him, what should someone do for someone who the king loves? It's pretty logical to assume that Haman thought he must be talking about me. This was such a big jump in Ruach HaKodesh. I needed to figure that out. There was no one else loved by the king other than Haman. And this that Haman went out of his way to give all these great things. Avada was because he thought that the king was clearly meaning himself. So it's not a big jump for Esther to say Haman thought this. That's not Ruach HaKodesh. That's just logic. The Rabbi Akiva, what did Rabbi Akiva said? Rabbi Akiva's pasuk was that Esther was beloved by everyone. She was no sechein. Maybe he holds like Rabbi Eliezer. So everyone wanted Esther to be considered. No one knew where she came from. So everyone said, "Oh, she's Persian. Oh, she's Madai. Oh, she's this." Everyone wanted to claim her as their own. That means that it clearly was public knowledge that everyone loved Esther. So that's not such a big jump to say that she was no sechein by everyone. V'hada Reb Meir, when Reb Meir said the pasuk v'yavada hadavar leMordechai, that Mordechai knew about Bigson B'Saresh, that also could be very simply explained. Dilma ki Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Damer Bigson B'Saresh Shnei Tarsiim Hayu. They were from a place called Tarsi, and they spoke a language called Tarsi. And Mordechai was from Anshe Knesset Gdola, which means he was on the Bezdin of 70, which means he knew how to speak all the 70 languages. If he knew how to speak all 70 languages, he knew Tarsi. So it's not Ruach HaKodesh. What do you mean? He overheard them. It's like when you're walking the street, people don't think you're Jewish. Maybe you're wearing a baseball cap and they speaking Hebrew, and all of a sudden you're like, I understand what he's saying. He doesn't know you understand what he's saying. Same thing. Yeah, fine. And what's the last one? V'had Rabbi Yossi ben Damascus. What was his pasuk? His pasuk was Ubebiza leisholchu es yadam. They didn't have email. How did they know that they didn't partake in the biza? Dilma pristik each other. What do you mean? They didn't have email, but they could have sent messengers, and maybe they found out. So all of those could be pushed away as not being because of Ruach HaKodesh. However, the Shmuel Vade Leslie Pircha, I have no kash on, and therefore that pasuk itself would be a raya for Ruach HaKodesh by Esther. Revina Hainu de Amri Inchi. It's like people say Tavachada Pilpata Charifta, better one spicy pepper mimlei tzani curry than a whole plate of big gourds. Meaning the point is, he says sometimes even one tiny little thing, but if it's sharp, it's much stronger than a whole bunch of other stuff. Shmuel, who was an Amoira many years later, he said the starkest pasuk, even though all these great Tanoim I could have asked Kashan on it. Rav Yosef Amar Me'acha. Rav Yosef says a different svara. He said, how do I know that Esther was Baruch HaKodesh Nemra? Because it says, "V'yimei hapurim ha'ele lo ya'avru mitoch ha'Yehudim." It will never leave the Jews. How do you know that there will be no Purim in the future? How can you say that unless it was Baruch HaKodesh? Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak Amar, he says from a different pasuk, Me'acha v'zichram lo yosef mizaram, that the memory, meaning the statement, the fact that we'll be reading Megillah, will never leave from my children. Again, they bring a raya from here to the Shitas of Rambam that will always have Mikra Megillah even after Bias Goyal Tzedek. Matanas Lavyan said in the Mishnah, Tni Rav Yosef Mishloach Manos Ish L'Re'ehu. The din of Mishalach Manos is 2 gifts to one person. Matanas Levionim, Shtei Matanas, 2 gifts, L'Shnei Bnei Adam. Yeah? Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya Shadalei, we're going to see a story of how they kept Shalach Manos, Matanas Levionim. Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya Shadalei L'Rabbi Oshia. Itma the Igla Tilta, he sent him like a thigh or a leg of a very, very tasty type of calf. The Garba de Chamra, and like a barrel of wine. Shalach Lei, he sent back to him, Kiyamta Bonu Rabbeinu Umishloich Manas Ish L'Re'ehu, and they take out here Matanas Levyonim. There's different gears we don't have time to go through, unless maybe tonight we'll do it because it is a little late, and because the next Gemara really is the Chayv Yish Psumi, and it's so geschmack to discuss it. But either way, he said you were Mekayim with this mitzvah Mishalach Manas Ish L'Re'ehu.
Do it at dinner, maybe.
Yeah, maybe at dinner.
Okay. Is that
Oh,
cra-
boy.
is that-
Oh, boy.
is that a
I'm
cra-
not going to Maryland.
No, you're not going? So you'll be there
I'm
tonight.
not going to the moment.
Oh,
Oh,
for
wow.
sure.
For Shalema.
All right, let's hop
Maybe
right.
that's
Let's get.
not-
Let's
maybe that's not a bad idea.
yeah. Let's do it.
Beautiful.
Okay. Rabba Shadar Leila Mari Bar Mar. This is a crazy story over here. Rabba Shadar Leila Mari Bar Mar. Rabba wants to send Shalach Manas to Mari Bar Mar. So what did he do? He set it in the hands of Abai, Biad Abai. So Rabba is sending Shalach Manas to Mari Bar Mar, and he did it through Abai. Really, from the lashon of Mishloach Manas, he sent it with Abai. Now, what did he send him? Mila Taska de Kishba. He sent them basically like a bag of dates. Umili Kasa Kimcha de Avshuna, and sort of like toasted grain of some type. And the point is that this wasn't really the most coveted thing. It wasn't the best. Yeah. Amarli Abaye said to his Rebbe, Rabba, maybe you should up the game here a little bit and send a little bit of a nice shalach manas. Hashda Amar Mari, because Mari is going to say the following when he receives it. He's going to say, Icha Kla Malka Leheve, if a poor man becomes the king, Dikula Mitzaver Leinachis, he's not going to take off the I don't know what the dikula, like the basket or whatever it is. Meaning the way of a poor person is to go around with something around his neck. He's feeding the animals, whatever it is, right? If that guy who's all of a sudden wins the lottery, he's still going to go around wearing the basket around his neck? No, he's going to buy a Ferrari. He's going to get a big house. He's going to give out nice things, right? Rabbi, you became the Rosh Yeshiva in Pumbedisa. All of a sudden, you're still sending what you used to send when you didn't have any money. Now you're a big shot. You're a big shot. You should be, meaning it's they bring rayas from here that when you send shalach manas, in order for it to be a simcha to the other person, it is all totally on the person. If someone has no money and he sends you shalach manas of a can of Coke with an apple, you're so besimcha because you see this person who doesn't have anything went out of his way to get you something like that. But if you know a big veer, a close friend of yours, and he sends you that shalach manas, in your mind you're like, really? This is my friend? This is what you send me? Meaning, the whole point of shalach manas is to be mar besimcha. So it has to be kol l'kfi, the person's that giving and the person that's receiving it, right? So you see over here that Abayi was telling Rabbi, I don't understand. I think Mari's going to be a little upset about this. You're a big Rosh Shiva, right? So Hadar Shadar Le Ihu, and so Abayi brings the shalach manas. It doesn't seem like Rabbi really changed his mind. He said, no, this is what I'm sending. Hadar Shadar Le Ihu, and so then Abayi brings it to Mari Bar Mar, and now he sends back to Rabbi. What does he send back? Malay Tiska de Zangvila, which is like ginger, Umale Casa de Pilpalta Aricha, and some sort of a long type of pepper. Meaning he sent him back, it seems like even worse. He sent him back even worse than what he received. Amar Abaye, and Abaye said to Mari Bar Mar, he said, what do you mean? Hashda Amar Mar. What do you mean? What's Rabbi going to say? Ana Shadri Lechulya, I sent him Gishmak, sweet things. Maybe it wasn't the highest level, but at least it was sweet. The Ihu Shadri Lechurfa, and he sent me back all this spicy, awful stuff. Meaning the point is that exactly what Abaye suggested was going to happen, and it seems like Mari Bar Mar had a little bit of a sense of humor, and he sent him back, you're going to send me over there? Now, and I'll see why is it obvious that was a sense of humor? Because if he didn't have, maybe you'll tell me Mari Bar Mar didn't have anything. Maybe this is all he could send. Mar says no. Amar Abaye, kinafki mi Beimar, when I left Beimar, Havi Savannah, when I left the house of Rabbah, my Rebbe, I was full. I ate enough. I had enough food. Over there. However, Kimati Lahasam, when I got to Mari Bar Mar, krivuli shisen si. They brought me 60 dishes, the shisen money kedera on 60 different plates. The achlibu shisen plugi, and I had a piece from every single one of them. Ubi shula basrais, the last thing that I ate. Have karale, they called tzli kedar. It was like, think of it like a slow cooked brisket, like a roasted meat. That, and what does he say over here? It was so good. Uboy lemechas tzo abasra. It was so good. I was eating the plate. That's how much I was licking the plate. I was eating the plate afterwards. So what do you see? It's like a person who's a poor person who doesn't even know how hungry he is because he's so used to being hungry. I thought I was full, but when I got to his house, I realized what good eating is. Inami ravcha lebsim meshchiach. Also, he says there's always room for dessert. There's always room for a good dish. The Chassam Sofer, I think, is over here that says over here that this entire Gemara is the Derech Rem is talking about Torah. And he says that when Abaye was by Rabbi, he thought I had learned everything already. I was Sava. I had everything I needed. However, when I went to Mari Bar Mar and I learned deeper Torah, I learned other things, I saw that there was so much more. What does it mean? He sent him 60 dishes, the 60 Masechtas of Shas. He showed me in each one of the Masechtas, I had a little piece, I had a little palga, I had a new Chiddush here and a new Chiddush there, right? He said, right? So he says over there, he says, and that's what he means when he says over here at the end, Hainu da Amri Inshi, Gifin Anya v'lo Yoda. A person thinks he knows everything, but there's no end to it. You can constantly find more depth in Torah. And they said just like that, even if a person spends his whole morning Seder stark, someone comes over to him at lunch and says, I have a geschmack of art. He's like, all right, tell me. Because even if it's a good dish, there's always room for dessert, right? I mean, there's always room for that. All right. Tonight, I think we should pick up from here because Lamaisa, this next, it's really not much. I want to just go to the Mishnah. I'm not going to go past the Mishnah. We'll pick up from the Mishnah tomorrow morning. But yeah. But this last Gemara here, Rabbi is so geschmack Gemara.
Are you going to bring copies?
Oh yeah, I can do that. Smart idea. Yeah, no. I'll bring copies. It's gonna get dirty. I'm gonna bring copies. No bringing Gemaras tonight. Akiva might bring his Gemara. Akiva Portis might bring his Gemara because he said he has to make a sim.
So let's do like part of the meal. I don't want to spend the whole.
It's gonna be quick. It'll be quick. 8-10 minutes.